I sat in that cold courtroom, watching Jessica as she strolled in like she owned the place. Her hand rested on her stomach in a deliberate display, her face painted with just the right amount of exhaustion and fragility to sell her act. She even let out a dramatic sigh as she took her seat, as if the weight of the world rested on her delicate shoulders. I should have seen this coming. I had been through months of delays, manipulation, and deceit, all orchestrated by the woman I once called my wife. She had dragged out every step of this divorce, tried to milk it for all it was worth, hoping to wear me down. But this was a new level of audacity. Jessica was pregnant, and she wanted me to pay for it. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. She was waiting for me to react, waiting for me to look nervous, guilty, trapped. I wasn't. She thought she had me cornered. She thought this baby was her golden ticket, but she had no idea. Ethan, my lawyer, sat beside me, calm as ever. He was the kind of man who smiled when he knew he was about to destroy you. I didn't like lawyers much, but I respected Ethan. He had spent the last few months tearing apart every false claim Jessica had thrown at me, exposing every lie she had tried to weave into the divorce proceedings. Today would be no different. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Jessica's lawyer, a young guy fresh out of law school, stood up, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client has been placed in an impossible situation. She is pregnant, unemployed, and struggling due to the emotional and financial hardship caused by this prolonged divorce. She simply requests the alimony she is rightfully owed. Jessica sniffled on cue, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a tissue. Ethan waited, letting the courtroom settle into the illusion she was creating. Then smoothly, he stood. Your Honor, while we obviously sympathize with Ms. Parker's plight, we need to clarify a few key points before proceeding. He turned to Jessica's lawyer, his expression unreadable. Who is the father of this child? The room went silent. Jessica stiffened. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My client believes it is the petitioner's. Believes? I almost laughed. Ethan tilted his head slightly, his tone polite but firm. Believes. Does she have any proof of that? Jessica's fingers curled against the table. The judge leaned forward. Miss Parker, have you taken a paternity test? Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see it now, the exact moment she realized she had made a mistake. I assumed. You assumed, the judge repeated, unimpressed. Ms. Parker, is there any evidence to suggest the petitioner is the father? Her lawyer hesitated. He looked at her, waiting for an answer. Nothing. Ethan took his cue. Your Honor, we have substantial reason to believe this child is not my client's. He slid a folder across the table. This contains time-stamped photographs of Ms. Parker vacationing with another man, holding hands, kissing, taken 2 months after she and my client separated. Additionally, we have subpoenaed her medical records, which confirm her first positive pregnancy test was taken months after she and my client last lived together. The silence in the room grew heavier. Jessica's face paled. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. The judge exhaled slowly. Ms. Parker, this court does not tolerate deception. Given the evidence, there is no legal justification for financial support. The prenuptial agreement stands. You will not receive alimony. Boom! Jessica's entire body flinched as if she had been struck. Your Honor, this isn't fair, she burst out. I have a baby to care for. How can he just walk away? The judge was already done. Until paternity is confirmed, this child has no legal bearing on these proceedings. Jessica turned to me, desperation flaring in her eyes. Michael, please, she whispered. You wouldn't just abandon me like this. I leaned forward, my voice calm. You really want to go on record accusing me of being the father? Because if you do, I will demand a court-ordered paternity test right now. Her jaw clenched. She had nothing. The judge slammed the gavel. This hearing is concluded. And just like that, it was over. But Jessica wasn't done yet. As soon as we left the courtroom, she stormed after me, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. You're a monster, she spat. You let them humiliate me in there. I turned, taking my time as I looked her up and down. Which part humiliated you? I asked. The part where you tried to scam the court, or the part where you realized I was 3 steps ahead? Her hands clenched into fists. You set me up. I smiled. No, Jessica, you set yourself up. I just let you walk into it. She turned to my mother, Diane, playing her last desperate card. Diane, you don't agree with this, do you? You know I loved your son. How can you let him do this to me? My mother crossed her arms. I made the mistake of believing you once, she said, her voice firm. Never again. Jessica's lips quivered. Then her expression twisted with fury. I hope you rot, she hissed. I hope you end up miserable and alone. Before I could respond, a voice cut through the tension. Ms. Parker, a court officer stepped forward. We need you to come with us. Her body tensed. What? Why? The judge has recommended an inquiry into potential perjury and fraud. You'll need to answer some questions. Her eyes went wide. Wait, no, this isn't. They were already leading her away. Ethan clapped a hand on my shoulder. Well, he said, that was satisfying. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, I murmured. It was. That night, as I sat in my apartment, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a second, then typed back. I am, thanks for asking. I blocked the number. 2 days passed before I heard from Jessica again. I thought she'd be too busy dealing with the fallout of her disastrous court performance, but apparently she still had energy left for one last fight. I was at my apartment, unwinding with a glass of whiskey when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I already knew. I stared at it for a second before picking up. You have some nerve, Jessica's voice came through, dripping with venom. I sighed. Jessica, you really should focus on your legal troubles instead of calling me. You ruined my life, she hissed. I leaned back, completely unbothered. No, you ruined your life. I just sat back and let you do it. Her breathing was erratic. For the first time, she wasn't just angry. She was desperate. You think this is over? She snapped. You think you can just walk away from this and be happy? I swirled the whiskey in my glass. Yes, actually, that's exactly what I plan to do. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Fine, she spat. If I can't get what I deserve, I'll make sure you don't get to be happy either. Then she hung up. I put my phone down, shaking my head. That should have been the end of it. But Jessica was a storm that didn't die down so easily. The next day, Ethan called me. You need to be careful, he said, his voice tense. Jessica's pulling something. I frowned. What now? She's been talking to people, trying to spread a story that you abandoned her while pregnant. I sighed. She has no proof. We already exposed her in court. Doesn't matter, Ethan said. She doesn't need proof. All she needs is the right audience. And that's when it hit me. Jessica wasn't aiming for a legal win anymore. She was aiming for revenge. She knew she had lost. She knew there was no money coming her way. So now, she was trying to ruin my reputation. I checked my social media that night, and sure enough, there were posts floating around. Vague accusations, whispers just enough to make people wonder. Some people took her side. Some people laughed at her. But I knew her well enough to know this was just the beginning. Then things escalated. The next morning, I left my apartment to find my car vandalized. Deep scratches ran across the doors, and the windshield had been shattered. A sick feeling crept into my stomach. I called the police, and while they took my statement, I already knew what they'd say. No cameras in the parking lot, no way to prove it was her. But I knew. This was a warning shot. Later that evening, Ethan called again. You need to press charges, he said. I know you're tired of this, but she's not stopping. You need to shut this down before it gets worse. I hesitated. I had wanted to be done with her. Wanted to move on. But Jessica wasn't letting me. So I did exactly what Ethan advised. I filed a police report. I documented everything. And then, for good measure, I sent a message to her. Me. I know what you're doing. It stops now, or I make sure you see the inside of a jail cell. She didn't respond, but I knew she got the message. And then, just when I thought she couldn't sink any lower, she did. 3 days later, I got a call from my boss. Michael, he said, his voice careful, I got a concerning email today. I already knew. From Jessica, I asked, rubbing my temple. He hesitated. So it's not true? I let out a humorless laugh. What did she say? She's claiming you abandoned her while she was pregnant, refused to support her, and are now harassing her through legal channels to silence her. I let out a deep breath. It's all bullshit, I said. You want court documents? Medical records? Proof she's lying? My boss sighed. Not necessary, I figured as much. But she's persistent. And she's making noise. I knew Jessica. She wasn't just throwing a tantrum. She was trying to make my life hell. Trying to cost me my job. Trying to turn my world upside down just because she couldn't get what she wanted. I clenched my fists. Enough was enough. I called Ethan immediately. We're going after her, I said. Ethan didn't even hesitate. Good. I already have a case building. The next day, we filed a defamation lawsuit. And just like that, the game changed. Jessica thought she could keep throwing punches, but this time I hit back. And when she got the court summons, she panicked. I got one last call from her that night. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the best of me. When I picked up, she was crying. Michael, she whispered, you don't have to do this. I closed my eyes. Yes, Jessica, I do. She let out a shuddering breath. Please, just drop it. Let's just move on. I laughed, actually laughed. That's rich coming from you, I said. You want me to move on? Fine. But first, you're going to pay for every single lie you spread. Silence. And then, the first honest thing she had said in months. I'm scared. Good. I hung up. The next few months were brutal for Jessica. She had no job, no alimony, and now she was tangled in a defamation suit she couldn't afford to fight. The judge didn't take kindly to her false allegations. She had to publicly retract her statements. She had to pay damages. And worst of all, her new boyfriend, who had stuck around through the pregnancy drama, finally did the math. He dumped her. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. And me, I was finally, blissfully free. A few months later, I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights. Everything was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in years, my life wasn't tangled in someone else's chaos. No more court dates, no more desperate phone calls, no more games. Jessica was gone. The lawsuit had crushed her. After losing the alimony case, she had no money to fight the defamation suit. No way to keep up the act. The moment she realized she was going to lose, she tried to settle. She offered to retract her statements to make it all go away. I let her. Not because I wanted to spare her, but because I was done wasting my energy on her. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. Last I heard, she had moved back in with her mother, trying to scrape together what was left of her life. Her new boyfriend had left. Her reputation was in shambles. As for the baby, I never found out who the father was, and honestly, I didn't care. What I did know was that Jessica had spent years manipulating people, using lies as currency, and in the end, she had run out of credit. I took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling lighter than I had in years. Some people might say I was cold, that I should have felt bad for her. But why? She made her choices, she played her games, and for once, she lost. And me? I was free. So what do you think? Do people like Jessica ever change, or do they just find new victims? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had to cut someone toxic out of your life, I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories just like this one.